Good evening and welcome to the Keese School. I'd like you to take a moment to silence your cell phones if you haven't already done it. We don't want to hear all of the ringing during the talk. I am Joy Jones. I'm a resident of Edwards Fisher, and I'm a member of the Keese School Curriculum Committee. Our speaker this evening, Genevieve Wall, is a senior naturalist at Nature Forward, a 128-year-old environmental nonprofit that is headquartered in Chevy Chase. Spending afternoons splashing through Rock Creek, doesn't that sound like something you would like to do even now? Tracking frogs, turtles, she even told me she liked to catch spiders, and exploring Washington, D.C.'s parks. During her childhood, it had instilled in her a deep reverence for nature and gave her a mission to help unite people in appreciation for and protection of the natural world. Tonight, she will share her excitement and knowledge of those wonderful flying mammals that fill the skies in the evening, bats. And no, she did not bring them to release, and so you don't have to worry about it. So Genevieve, thank you, and welcome to Asbury.
Thank you so much, Joy, for that kind introduction. I am sorry to disappoint that I don't have live bats to release out from my cape for us tonight. But I want to share a little bit about why bats are important to me. There are few things I love more than enjoying the symphony of sounds that unfurl on a summer evening. From the chirping of crickets and katydids to the amphibian ambiance of spring peepers, bullfrogs, and green frogs, there are few other things that bring me back to feeling such a sense of peace and connection with the earth. And as you listen to these sounds, you may find that it stirs some memories for you as well. For me, it brings to mind the scent of spice bush and pawpaw on the damp earth, the murmur of a creek, and the stirring and rustling of critters through the leaf litter. The human ear can hear sounds between a frequency band of about 20 hertz to about 20,000 hertz. That means every sound you've ever loved in your life falls within that relatively narrow band of frequencies. Your favorite song, a loved one's voice. But if magically you could hear up to 100,000 hertz, an entirely new symphony of pulsing percussive sound would become apparent to you. As you listened to a summer night like this, you would also hear the whirs, clicks, and calls of bats as they wheel through the night sky. Bats make these sounds to communicate socially with each other, but also, more famously, to echolocate. About 70% of bat species have this ability, and what it is they are emitting these pulses of high-frequency sound. And as they emit these sounds, the sound waves bounce off of other objects. Could be a tree branch they need to avoid. It could be a delicious tiger moth that they want to eat. Or it could be an owl that they really definitely do not want to cross paths with. And this echolocation allows them to pinpoint the spatial position of predators, of prey, of obstacles, of water sources. So it's one of the most famous and fascinating facts about bats, and just one of the things about bats we'll enjoy together today. So backing up a little bit, again, my name is Genevieve Wall. I'm the senior naturalist at Nature Forward. Nature Forward is a 128-year-old environmental nonprofit. We're based in Chevy Chase, Maryland, but we work all throughout the greater DC region. I am not a bat biologist myself, but I am a bat enthusiast and an educator who's excited to spread awareness about these often maligned mammals of Maryland and of the world. So at Nature Forward, our mission was originally founded for bird conservation. But in the many years that we've been around, we've expanded, and now we do conservation work like water quality monitoring and advocacy. We do restoration, both throughout the general DC area and at our 40-acre nature sanctuary in Chevy Chase. That sanctuary is open to the public from dawn to dusk every day of the year for free. And so if you ever want to come check us out, we definitely recommend that you do. It's a beautiful nature sanctuary. And we do education as well for all ages. We have a preschool on site for our youngest naturalists in training. We do summer camps and do field trips, in-class lessons for school-age students. And in my work, I work with our adult audiences. So our adult programs, if you enjoy this talk tonight, and if you're curious to get out in the field or take other classes with myself and other naturalists throughout the DC area, definitely recommend checking us out. We're gonna come back to echolocation for a second. So in a moment, I'm gonna show you a video of echolocation in action. The researchers who collected this video slowed it down, both the video and the audio, so that those echolocation frequencies that are normally beyond human hearing are brought to an area where we can hear. This is a short video, about 30 seconds. Look at that sharp turn. I would tremble to be a moth in that video. So more generally and more broadly, let's back up. What are bats? Bats are animals, and they're mammals like us. So that means they give birth to live young, they nourish them with milk, and they grow hair. What distinguishes bats from other mammals is their ability to power themselves through flight. This is very different than the casual gliding that a flying squirrel can do. We're talking wing-pumping, full-on, powered flight. You saw the way that one bat arced and turned really strongly. Bats are in the order Chiroptera, which translates to hand wing. And if you take a look at this illustration over here, you can see that this over here is the upper arm bone, this over here is the forearms, and these are modified finger bones over here. And so bats, like us, can control each of those finger bones individually, which gives them impressive precision and agility in flight. In general, bats are nocturnal, which means they emerge out at dusk to forage for food and generally come back to their roosts at dawn. And they eat a variety of foods, which we'll talk about later. Across the globe, there are about 1,400 known species of bats, 10 of which you can find out here in Maryland. And their diversity is enormous. The smallest bat that we know to exist is this teeny little bat called the bumblebee bat that lives in Thailand and Myanmar. It's about 1 inch long, whereas the largest bat that exists has a wingspan about as big as mine, and that's the golden-crowned flying fox, which you can find in the Philippines. Our Maryland bats are generally much more moderate in size, ranging from 4 to 10 inches or so. So let's talk a little bit about bats' relationships with other species in the wider ecosystem around them. And we'll start with what they eat. Now, I'm going to give you all a chance to call out, what do you think the most species of bats eat? What do you think might be the most popular food? Oh my gosh. So I hear a lot of mosquitoes. And more broadly, insects, you're right. About 885 species of those 1,400 species of bat eat insects. So not just mosquitoes, but other insects as well. All right, anybody want to guess the second most popular food for bats? I heard it, fruit. Awesome, about 400 bat species eat fruit. Things like mangoes, bananas. All right. Any takers for the third? A number of you had it for the last guess. Nectar, awesome. Just like honeybees and hummingbirds, there are about 100 species of bats that feed on nectar. Now, some of you may be doing the math over here, and you may remember that we have about 1,400 species of bats overall. If you're adding up the numbers over here, you'll see that we're almost there. There's only about 15 species left. So it's going to get a little harder now. Anybody want to hazard a guess what the next most common food for bats might be? I heard fish, a little more broad. Not blood, but we'll get there. Meat, I heard it. So there are a dozen species of bat that consume meat, and these are usually small mammals like mice or voles, or amphibians, things like frogs, toads, salamanders. And then the very last category, there we go. So there are 3 species of bat that are known as vampire bats. A lot of people sometimes are afraid of bats because they think that they might be vulnerable to a vampire bat. But of these 3 species, out of the 1,400 species of bats that exist, none of them live in our area. These 3 species of bats live in Central and South America, and there are a lot of myths about vampires that are not true about vampire bats. Myth number 1, vampires drain their victims dry. Vampire bats don't do that. What they do is they make a teeny little incision while a mammal is sleeping, and they lap up small droplets of blood. Myth number 2, vampire bats target humans. A real vampire bat is more likely to go for a wild mammal or a farm animal or a bird, so humans are not their target food. And myth number 3, the fact that they eat blood makes them super scary. In reality, it's actually beneficial to humans to study and learn about these species. Vampire bats have these compounds called anticoagulants in their saliva, which help blood thin. And so there are scientists who are studying their saliva today to see if those compounds might be helpful medical treatments to prevent blood clots in humans. So there are many ways that bats benefit humans. And since we're on the subject of food, let's talk a little bit about the ways that bats help humans with their food supply. So we talked a little bit about the fruit feeding and the nectar feeding bats. We're going to stay with them for a little bit longer. Now, anybody here in the audience, go ahead and nod your head if you like mango. Awesome, I hear some enthusiastic yeses. Anybody like banana? All right, how about margaritas? All right, I'm gonna take that as a yes. So these are all fruits that bats play a role in helping the fruit survive. For fruit-eating bats, when they eat a fruit like a mango or a banana or a papaya, sometimes they eat those seeds too. And as the seed passes through the digestive system of the bat, the enzymes in the bat's saliva and its stomach and its intestines actually help break down that hard outer casing on the seed and prime it to better be able to germinate. When the bat releases the seed in their guano, which is a fancy word for bat droppings, now that seed that's been primed to germinate better and softened up is spontaneously deposited in this nutrient-rich and beautiful substrate for that little seed to have the best chance to grow up into a mature fruit-producing adult plant. And so fruit-feeding bats help make more fruit in the long run for bats, humans, and other species alike. Now for our nectar feeders, just like hummingbirds and honeybees, butterflies, and moths, when the bats are chasing that delicious sugary nectar that the flowers produce, the fuzz on their coats ends up trapping pollen as well. And so as the bat goes from flower to flower, they're pollinating and helping the plant reproduce sexually. And so more pollinating bats, more reproduction for the plant. So those are really critical ways that bats help support food systems for humans and other animals. In the United States, we've got 3 species of nectar-feeding bats, all of which live in the American Southwest. We've got the Mexican long-tongued bat, the Mexican long-nosed bat, and the lesser long-nosed bat. And these bat species are really critical for the agave industry. So those of you who gave an enthusiastic reaction for liking margaritas, if you like agave syrup or tequila, you may have these bats to thank as well. Now, our Maryland bat species do not eat fruit. They do not eat nectar. What they eat are insects. But this is beneficial for our food systems too. I heard, dare I say, a little glee in the word mosquitoes when you all were shouting out that bats love to eat mosquitoes. And living in the DC area, having just been through a hot, humid DC summer, I can completely understand why. I'm right there with you for the bats eating mosquitoes. There was a 2011 analysis published in the journal Science that found that bats add about $3.7 billion worth of non-toxic pest control services for the US agricultural industry every year. $3.7 billion. And that was just the low estimate. The high estimate went up to 53 billion. Yeah. So that is an enormous amount of pest control services. This little fella on the screen is a little brown bat. And a little brown bat can eat about 1,000 mosquitoes per hour. Let's hear it for the little brown bat. A pregnant or nursing mama, little brown bat, can eat about 4,000 mosquitoes in the same amount of time, which as a pregnant human mama right now, I can relate. So little brown bats live in colonies, and those colonies can have up to 100 individuals or so. So a little more time to do the math. We've got 1,000 mosquitoes per hour for most little brown bats, with some eating 4 times as many, times up to 100 individuals per colony. We're talking millions of mosquitoes every night from one little brown bat colony. Thank you, little brown bats. Let's get a little more familiar with some of the bats that we're likely to find in Maryland. The little brown bat is one of them, and this dapper individual is another. This is the hoary bat. They're one of our tree bats. So those 10 species of bats we have in Maryland are generally divided into 2 categories. And the category depends on what their behavior is like during the winter months. So in general, the tree bats are either going to migrate down to warmer climates to avoid the winter cold, or they'll hibernate in tree cavities, under bark, in leaf litter to keep themselves warm. Whereas our cave bats, guess where they hibernate? Caves. Very well named. These are the species of bats we have in Maryland, image courtesy of the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. So our tree bats over here, we already met the hoary bat. That was the one on the last page. We also have the eastern red bat, the silver-haired bat, and the evening bat up here. And then our cave bats are all these others. So we see our little brown bat up top, big brown bat right below it, the northern long-eared bat, and then down below the bottom, we have the Indiana bat, the eastern small-footed bat, and the tricolored bat. Pop quiz at the end. I'm just kidding. So how do we find out more about which bat species live where we live? Well, it comes down to monitoring, and we're back to echolocation. Over here, we're looking at an image called a spectrogram, and this is a visual representation of what a sound looks like. So on the x-axis over here, we have our frequency measured in kilohertz. On the bottom, we have our time in milliseconds. And what you'll see is that this particular sound, at its lowest, it's about 25,000 hertz, and at its highest, it's about 60,000 hertz. And it also has kind of a distinctive hockey stick sort of swoosh shape to it. I'm going to play the sound so you can listen to it. Was that too soft, or were you all able to hear that okay? Hear that okay? Okay. So you can hear that sort of downward swooshing and then the high pitch. And you can also see where the sound gets louder, where the color becomes more yellow instead of blue. This is the signature of a big brown bat. So different bat species will present differently on the spectrogram. They'll have different bands of frequencies that they make calls in, and the visual pattern of the sound will look a little different too. So here's an example on the next slide of just a sample of 2 of the species we have in Maryland. This here's the tricolored bat up top and the eastern red bat below. And I'm showing it here to give you a sense of what scientists look for when they're monitoring for bats and trying to understand and interpret the acoustic signals that their instruments are hearing into estimates about which populations are present and detected. So at the top, the tricolored bat, like the big brown bat we just heard before, has a hockey stick-shaped insonogram appearance, kind of right around there. So that's that same sort of J swoosh. Whereas the eastern red bat has more of a U shape, so there's going to be more of an upward inflection back at the end in the sound. Here are some images of what bat monitoring can look like. On the left, we've got a passive monitoring system. So this is a box that could be attached to a pole or a tree and packed with batteries. And so the system runs passively, and the researchers are able to collect the data from it. Either it can be transmitted in real time, or they can gather data recorded locally on the instrument every so often. And then there are also active monitoring stations where volunteers and biologists can go out and they can use that instrument, that microphone up at the very top, to capture sounds from bats that they then interpret. One of the things that we do at Nature Forward in our adult programs is we have a Master Naturalist training program. Master Naturalist is a program across multiple states where people can take classes where they learn a little bit about lots of different aspects of natural history, and then volunteer 40 hours each year with projects that support public lands, state and federal biologists, and other nonprofits. So I was able to participate in some bat monitoring back in my Master Naturalist chapter in Virginia and the Pocahontas State Park chapter, and got really interested in bat monitoring then. Unfortunately, bat populations are plummeting lately and facing a lot of challenges. One of the biggest challenges that bat populations are facing is habitat loss. So development, the reduction of forests and fields and scrub habitat. If you imagine a tree bat colony, let's say you have a colony of silver-haired bats roosting in a dead tree, and somebody takes down that dead tree, then you have a colony with nowhere to go. Climate change is also a threat to bats. As weather patterns become more severe and less predictable, especially for the bat species that migrate and hibernate, that can throw their entire annual cycles out of balance with the phenomenon and return of insect populations or with the temperature patterns that they're used to. Roost disturbance is another issue impacting bats. That's an area where kind of human and bat conflict can sometimes come into play. Pesticides are also a big issue. We talked about how that tiny little brown bat can eat 1,000 mosquitoes per hour, so several thousand mosquitoes per night. If mosquito spray is being used in that field where the bats are hunting the mosquitoes, they're ingesting the cumulative amount of pesticide that all of those thousands of mosquitoes have eaten as well. And so the biomagnification of the pesticide impacting along the food chain can lead to health issues for the bats. One area of pollution that people don't often think about is actually light pollution. When lots of artificial light are projected across bat habitat, first of all, it makes it easier for the bat's prey to see where the bats are and easier for the insects to avoid them. And it also makes the bats much more visible to predators like owls that might like to eat them. Since bats have the ability to echolocate, they are at their best advantage when hunting and foraging and surviving in the dark. And then there is also disease. This image over here is of a bat suffering from a fungus called white nose fungus, experiencing white nose syndrome. I hear some sounds in the audience like some of you have heard of this before. This fungus is called Pseudogymnoascus destructans. And as that specific epithet at the end might clue you into, this is a highly destructive fungus to bats. Since the fungus was introduced to the US in 2006, over 6 million bat deaths have been recorded by the US Fish and Wildlife Service. And in particular, some of the species of bats that are impacted, back to our friends, the little brown bats, those voracious mosquito eaters. In a colony after 3 years of exposure to the fungus, there was a 98% population decline. In Maryland, the 3 bats that are most susceptible to the fungus are the little brown bat, the northern long-eared bat, and the tricolored bat. And it's no accident that these are our cave bats. Because when you think about a cave, it's dark, it's damp, the hibernating bats are all clustered together to hold in warmth for the winter time. That is exactly the kinds of conditions in which a fungus can spread and grow really well. And the way that this fungus impacts the bats is it disrupts their hibernation. And so while a healthy bat would hibernate all winter long, a bat infected with the white nose fungus will wake up periodically. And what that means is that their metabolism is revving up and they're burning calories that they're not going to be able to replenish because there are not mosquitoes out to hunt in January or February. And so over time, the impact of this fungus is really decimating these populations. I don't have the statistics for the northern long-eared bat, but little brown-eared bat was 98% decline in 3 years, and tricolored bat was 90% decline in 3 years. So what are some things that we might be able to do to try and help or support these bat populations? One way is helping to create positive habitat. Native plants that support pollinators support healthy insect populations, and healthy insect populations support healthy bats. And you don't need lots and lots of acres to be able to plant a native wildflower meadow or anything like that. I'm going to share out with you all this slide. This is a webinar that Master Naturalist Diana Colangelo, who's a part of our organization, put together about how to do a native plant garden on a patio or a container garden. So I'll share that out for folks who may be interested. It's available for free on our YouTube channel. We won't watch the whole webinar right here, though. Another thing that's valuable is leaving up dead snags where possible. There are certainly circumstances where a dead tree could pose a risk to human life or limb, but if there is a tree that's out in the woods or out in a field and not posing a danger to people, leaving it up helps support not just the tree bats who might use it for habitat, but also for woodpeckers and fungi and other insects that all support a diverse and healthy ecosystem. Back to our light pollution idea, having darker skies is really critically important to bats. And so making sure that outdoor light sources that are artificial are well aimed, are capped so that they're not projecting light way up high into the sky where people don't need it, and are generally dimmer and warmer toned are good ways to help support bat populations. For those who have pets and cats, leaving them inside, outdoor cats hunt bird and bat populations alike, so keeping cats indoors is helpful. And another thing is providing, amplifying the bat habitat with bat boxes. I hear that there's a habitat committee here at Asbury, and so if this is something, if there's anybody in the audience who's a part of that committee or would love to share some of these resources with them, there may be some great opportunities to reduce mosquito populations by inviting bat colonies to come live in your area. So these are some ways that we can help bats. In addition, you can also use your voice. You can share out information about that bats are beneficial for people who are nervous about bats in their area or concerned that they might carry diseases or be a cause of conflict. You can help educate it and spread awareness. And you can also make sure that policymakers in your area, in your local, state, and federal governments know that conservation issues are important to you. So when I think back to that summer night with the sounds of those katydids and all of that sound that we're not hearing with the bats over top, one of the things that I think about a lot is the importance of that memory and the importance of the diversity. As bat populations plummet, I want to live in a world where in another several generations, we still have all of these beautiful, diverse bat species. I want to live in a world where our great-great-great-grandchildren can still hear the frogs and can still listen to the bats and watch them wheeling around in the sky acrobatically and erratically. And so part of what I want you all to hopefully come away with is that understanding of how beneficial bats are to our ecosystem, and hope that all together with our voices, we can help continue a world where there are many, many bats. Thank you all very much. I have my information up over here. I think I talked a little faster than when I timed it at home. Sorry about that, Joy. Yeah. Of course.
So we'll have some folks going around with microphones, and if you want to ask a question, raise your hand, and these speedy people will race down to where you are. Lots of questions.
So how do they catch 1,000 mosquitoes so quickly?
That is a good question. I will go back to the picture where we look at the Maryland bats over here. First of all, bats fly very fast. If you've seen them silhouetted in the sky, the way that they dart around is very quick and efficient. That's not the one. One second. And some of the adaptations that they have, do you see those short snouts with those wide mouths? In the video with the echolocation, I wish we could have seen the bat catch the moth, but you would have seen that sort of wide catcher's mitt area opening up to catch insects. And that's not to say that the insects don't put up a fight. There are some moth species that can actually detect when bats are echolocating, and they can use strategies like putting out sound disturbances, to interfere with the bat's ability to echolocate and pinpoint their position. So I would say they're well adapted to hunting insects. And when you have as much activity as a bat does, you need to catch a lot of calories. And so over time, with natural selection, being very well adapted to catch lots of small, fast-moving little meals on the go.
Hi there. When I first saw the announcement about Nature Forward, I thought, is that a new group? I've lived here for 65 years. And the minute you mentioned 128 years, I thought, what's going on here? So silently, without you noticing, I asked my cell phone, Google, what is this? And I said, Nature Forward, rename. And sure enough, I remembered, you are the Audubon Society.
We are, yes. We are formerly the Audubon Naturalist Society. In our 128 years of history, we've actually had several names through our time. And a couple years ago, we moved our name to Nature Forward for a number of reasons. One is that the name Audubon Naturalist Society wasn't actually very descriptive about what we do or what our mission is. Our mission is to build a larger and more diverse community of people who treasure the natural world and work to protect it. And the name Nature Forward communicated that a lot more clearly. Additionally, some of you may or may not know about John James Audubon, but he had kind of a sordid history. He was a white supremacist, and he was also not that great of a paragon of scientific value either. He was known to doctor his samples to pretend that he discovered more species than he did. So while we acknowledge his contribution to bird conservation, we were also looking to not elevate John James Audubon as the namesake for our organization. And then another reason is that anybody here familiar with a national organization called the National Audubon Society? Imagine how many people got confused between ANS and NAS, especially us being located in the DC area. So it reduced confusion there as well.
Thank you for a mind-boggling presentation. I just wanted to tell everyone about my experience with bats, because I lived with them up close and personal in a farmhouse for 4 years in Honduras. And they were in the attic, and every night when Mama and Papa went out, the babies would make noise, which was, this is an old house, adobe house. And it was quite annoying. And they also had guano that would come through the ceilings that are made out of wood that would land on our bed. So I really wanted to get rid of them. And the other problem is that we had some horses. Every morning, I spent at least 40 minutes with gloves on, washing down the necks that are covered with blood from our friendly bats. That every night they went out and they did exactly what you said, is make the slice and lap up the blood. So I consulted with various Hondurans, and I got such brilliant ideas as covering my horses' necks with garlic. Okay, I did it, and I can guarantee it does not work. So then I decided, well, we'd put noise. That didn't work. Then we decided to put lights, and that didn't work. So finally, a vet said to me, you have to be careful because we're talking about possible rabies, and guano is falling on your bedspreads, and you are touching blood. So you've got to get rid of them. So we sent someone up with an old broken squash racket of my husband's, who dispatched the 12, I know, makes me sound like a killer. They were dispatched. And then I went into the bathroom, and as you know, in many places, people have bidets, and there I looked down, and there was a bat in my bidet, who was later dispatched. So I just wanted to tell you why I was the one, when you said, what did they eat? I said blood.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was a roller coaster. You are an amazing storyteller. And we'll add that to the list of other vampire myths busted about the garlic. I don't know that there would be anybody else in this area who would have the life experience to disprove that myth. Thank you for sharing. That was an incredible story, and you've had an experience with bats in Honduras that probably very few people in this room have experienced. Yeah. One thing I will say on the rabies point, as with any, many mammal species can transmit rabies. Bats are not any more likely to carry rabies than any other mammal species, but they can carry rabies just as a raccoon or a dog or a fox or a coyote could. Yeah.
What is the likelihood that a bat may carry rabies?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I don't think I heard.
What is the likelihood that a bat will carry rabies?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know I have read that statistic, so I can look up and share out afterwards. I'll make a note of that question.
Is
Or I
there
would, but I
any evidence that bats are starting to eat spotted lanternflies?
Another great question. For those, I hear a lot of sounds of recognition in the crowd, but in case anybody hasn't heard of the spotted lanternfly, I'll pull up a picture right now. These are an invasive species that have been making their way down from the north, and over the last year or two, they've become much more abundant out here in Maryland. You may recognize their adult form like this over here. You may also recognize, let me pull up some of their larval images. So when they're very young, they've got this very distinctive black and white pattern. And then in mid-June, they'll become this red polka dotted version. Let me see if I can find a better picture. There you go. So around mid-June, they'll look like this, and then the adults emerge later in summer, and they lay egg cases. They love targeting things like grapevines. They do also love other invasive species like porcelainberry and ailanthus or tree of heaven. But there is evidence that bats are starting to eat some spotted lanternflies. When there is an abundant food source somewhere, you can bet that some curious or hungry predators are going to give them a try. Even my husband and I have a dog, and he tried one of the spotted lanternflies. He didn't try more than one, so I'm not sure he liked it. But I'm hopeful that as the spotted lanternflies inevitably become more and more endemic to our area, that more and more native species will learn that they can eat them.
The big brown bat and the eastern red bat have been observed consuming them.
Ah, thank you. And for those who want a refresher on which ones those are, that was, oh yeah, sorry, with the lights on. So you said the eastern red bat and the big brown bat? Excellent, thank you.
Bats weren't always bats. So, according to evolution, how did they evolve and how long did it take for them to evolve?
That is a really good question. I don't know the answer, but I can also look it up. So the question was, bats weren't always bats. So in their evolutionary history, what was their common ancestor and how did they evolve? And I don't know that answer, but I am curious to find out.
Has anyone come up with a treatment for the white nose fungus or attempts to help the bats?
There has been a fair amount of research, but I don't know too much about what has been done or what the most up-to-date information are. So I'm getting a very wonderful list of questions to look up after this.
You mentioned that owls were a predator of the bats. Are there any other animals that are predators?
I think owls are probably the biggest threat to a bat because they're also so well adapted to hunting at night and have such keen senses. A baby bat on the ground that is defenseless. I'm sure opportunistic predators like coyote or foxes wouldn't turn up their nose if they had a chance. But primarily, since the bats are airborne and very agile, it takes an airborne agile predator to catch an airborne agile bat.
One over here.
If we encounter a bat in our residence, what's the best way to return him to the natural environment?
Great question. And I know that you over here have some hands-on experience with that in Honduras. In Maryland, generally it's recommended to reach out to your Department of Natural Resources or a local animal control area, and those professionals will have that specific expertise. In general, I would recommend before you try and interact with the bat yourself, call in for some of that expert advice.
If you've ever been to Austin, Texas, there is a bridge that at sunset, the bats come out from under the bridge by the hundreds of thousands. And it is just, I mean, it just looks like a murmuration of starlings, and it keeps going on forever and ever. And believe it or not, the Texas Department of Highways changed how they build bridges to accommodate bats so that they can nest under bridges in Texas.
That is amazing. And that particular bridge in Austin, Texas, there is a really wonderful bat conservation advocate named Merlin Tuttle. And he was a really large part of the advocacy that got that bridge spared. So this is his website, Merlin Tuttle's Bat Conservation. He also has an incredible photo gallery as well. I heard some murmurs in the audience. Has anybody else witnessed this in Austin? Okay. Wow, a handful of people. I have been to Austin once, but I actually never got a chance to see that while I was there, so I'll have to go back.
Hi, I have a question that will eventually lead to houses or housing. You mentioned that for wintering over, a bat either goes to a cave or he migrates to a warmer place. I was concerned whether or not any of the bats in Maryland are cave bats, because I would assume that only a cave bat might be tempted to live in a bat house. And is bat housing considered appropriate for supporting nature, or should we just leave it to the wild? And I might mention that I live on the other end of the pod from Kathleen, who mentioned her disdain for bats. I'm not thinking, Kathleen, of putting one up yet, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a great clarifying question. So our tree bats, depending on the species and depending on the specific conditions of where they are, they can migrate south to warmer climates, but they can also hibernate in tree cavities, under bark, under leaf litter. And so I believe that the wooden bat boxes would generally appeal more to the tree bats than they would to the cave bats, because they're looking for those dry cavities inside wooden structures.
What is the family life of a bat? That is, how many in the litter, and how do they go from baby bats to being mature mosquito catchers? What is the schooling of baby bats? How does the family work?
That is another fascinating question for which I'm going to have to go back to the resources to be able to answer with confidence and clarity. It may depend a bit on the species of bats. Not all may have the same lifespan or the same socialization structure. And even within the same species, there can be a wide range of colony sizes. like the little brown bats we talked about that can have colonies of about 100 individuals, can also have small colonies as well. So I'm going to add that one to the list, and I will send Joy.
You're gonna have to come back for another talk.
But hopefully, if there, I don't know if there's a way to share out in the Keese School notes afterwards. Okay, beautiful.
I was in Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, and there's several million go out of there every night. So what I'm wondering is, that's not an area for mosquitoes. What would there be down there that would be their primary food?
Yeah, I've been working in the Mid-Atlantic my whole life, so I don't have as much expertise around the southwestern area. There are insects across the whole, so they may not be eating mosquitoes specifically. They may be eating other insects as well. I'm not sure. I would have to look up the specific bat species and what their preferred diet is.
Okay, let's take one. There's two hands up. We'll take those as the last two.
So bats are nocturnal, but we now have mosquitoes in the daytime too. So has there been any of the species that have kind of adapted or seen an opportunity there to wake up earlier?
It's a great question. Bats are generally nocturnal. You'll usually see them coming out around dusk and dawn, and that crepuscular time around twilight is a really great time for a bat to forage. So just like for a human, you're not actively feeding every moment that you're awake. Bats will have periods that they're feeding and periods where they're doing other behaviors during the night. Some bats are actually our eastern red bat, which is one of our tree bats over here, and one of the ones that is apparently learning how to eat spotted lanternflies. You can sometimes see them out in the daytime. I got to witness one perched on a branch, just sort of kind of scrunched up, hanging upside down, apparently trying to rest. I had a gaggle of about 15, 7 to 12-year-old girls with me at the time. And so from a respectful distance, we admired this eastern red bat out in the middle. It was like 10 a.m. on a Saturday. So you can see them out, but in general, they're going to be more active at night.
Yes. I lived on a barrier island in South Carolina for 23 years. And when I first arrived to control the mosquito population, I put up 2 bat houses, and I researched it for the appropriate height at which to post them. But I never got any bats in 23 years. And I even purchased commercial iguana that I put down at the base of the 2 trees. So what more could I have done?
I would not blame yourself for the fact that the bats unfortunately didn't find those bat houses that you had lovingly put up. I would direct a Department of Wildlife Resources would probably have better advice for how to place them in ways that appeal to bats. I unfortunately don't know enough about your particular situation to say, Eureka, this is why the bats didn't come. But I would not beat yourself up, and it was a very lovely thing that you did that. And it also reminded me that there was a part 2 to an earlier question that I didn't answer, which was about whether it's better to sort of create artificial bat habitat with bat houses, or whether it's better to leave things to the wild. And what I would say to that, and I think that reasonable people could come away with different conclusions on this matter, but what I would say is that the rate at which bats are losing habitat and the rate at which the climate is changing is amplified by human activity. And so it makes sense to me that if human activity is accelerating the conditions that are causing bat populations to plummet, it's not necessarily a bad thing for human activity to direct itself towards trying to remedy or mitigate that problem. So that would be my answer.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.